Jai.
Iskandam Vichaya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki. BBT Pam Vichaya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Nitya Vishnu Om Vishnu Bhāgavatam Hansarupa Vichara Astatara Shri Shri. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Swami Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem Se Gaur Shri Krishna Chaitanya Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Shri Radha Govinda Gopinath Sham Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki. Shri Braja Govi Vrindavadam Ki. Shri Mahapadam Tirtham Ki. Shri Jagannath Puri Chaitradam Ki. Ragamaya Ki. Jamunamaya Ki. Bhakti Dev Ki. Shri Manti Tulsi Maharani Ki. Samaveta Bhakta Dev Ki. Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. Grantara Śrimad Bhāgavatam Ki Jai. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Additional Pastimes, chapter titled Return to America. This is a continued recollection of Mukunda Maharaj. Money is not bad if it is used in the proper way, Srila Prabhupada said. This is my first lesson in real renunciation, real spiritual life. He then asked me to edit the first volume of Śrimad Bhāgavatam, correcting punctuation and grammar. I was so thrilled and enthusiastic. After leaving his room very shortly after we spoke, I immediately began work. I was extremely excited about doing it. Leelavati's main occupation was taking care of her baby daughter Subhadra. She would treasure different incidents in which Prabhupada showed attention to her daughter. The first time he saw Subhadra returning from India, he said she was very fortunate, and he quoted a verse from the Bhagavad Gita to the effect that the yogi who does not complete his practice has a chance to be born in a family of pious brahmanas. Where's Bhakti-Kama? Usually he puts that.
It's charging.
It's charging? Well, usually you can attach it to the battery, because otherwise the live stream won't get any sound at all. And this is too echoey. So this is too loud, there's too much reverb on it. So you have to attach the road, you just have to use the battery pack. And he quoted a verse from the Bhagavad Gita to the effect that the yogi who does not complete his practice has a chance to be born in a family of pious brahmanas. Another time, noticing that Subhadra was sleeping in his presence, Prabhupada remarked laughingly, yes, young children and old men must take a lot of rest. Prabhupada's very intimate interactions with his young devotees. Krishnadas, another devotee. He was continually working on the Bhagavatam. He would make dictaphone tapes that he would send to Satsup every other day in Boston. I remember one morning as I was going to work, Govinda Dasi gave me this little package that was a tape with Satsup's address in Boston. And she asked me to mail it on my way to work. The address is on one side and the stamps were on the other. Every day when I went to work, Prabhupada left his door open. So whenever I would go to work, I would pay my obeisances, or sometimes as I was walking by, he would see me and ask me to come in, and he would give me a little prasadam. He would say, oh, you're off to work now? Good. I'm glad that you are staying. Then in the evening, I would get off the train, which would stop right at Willard Street. Prabhupada's room overlooked the streetcar stop. Sometimes I would get off the streetcar, and Prabhupada would be looking down at me from his room. So I'd pay my obeisances right there on the street, and he would nod. I would come in, and he would ask how the day was. So our relationship is very personal. I was never afraid of asking him if I had any difficulties. So when I was asked by Govinda Dasi to mail this tape, I stopped in Prabhupada's room and told him, and I noticed that the stamps were on one side and the address was on the other. Are you sure there won't be any difficulty in the mail? I asked. He said, no, there won't be any difficulty. I've done it before. So I went out and I was getting ready when I noticed that the thing was stapled. I had been mailing jewelry all my life, and I never said anything with staples, always a string or something in case the staples fell off. So I again knocked at the door and said, Swamiji, I've got to apologize. I don't mean to disturb you, but it's stapled. Are you sure it doesn't have to be tied? I was trying to be helpful, not critical. Maybe I was a little overconfident. So Swamiji said, no, it's all right. So I left. As I was putting my jacket on, I saw that about 2 inches of the envelope was unstapled and the tape was open to view. You could actually squeeze the thing, and although it couldn't fall out, it was visible. So I walked back in the room and I paid my obeisance and I said, Swamiji, you can see the tape inside. Prabhupada immediately hit his hand on the table, loudly and yelled, the spiritual master is never at fault. And even if he is, it is your duty as his disciple to do whatever he asks. He went on for at least a half an hour about how one should be very observant of what the spiritual master says and not criticize. It was like he was saying, I will be your spiritual master, and I will instruct you. What can I do if you won't take my advice? Krishnadas also got a chance to have shaved Prabhupada's head. So that was Krishnadas' regulation. Now this is Satsuru Maharaj. Krishnadas also got a chance to shave Prabhupada's head. Not many of the devotees in those days wore the Vaishnava Sika, the tuft of hair at the back of the head. Prabhupada had very little hair, but he did have a Sika, about 3 inches in diameter on the back of his head. I have my water bottle on the table outside Prabhupada's room. Could you grab that for me? Thinking that only the disciples wore the Sika, Krishnadas shaved off Prabhupada's Sika. But Prabhupada only mentioned it mildly. Oh, you have cut off my Sika. On another occasion, while shaving Prabhupada's head, Krishnadas cut him. But Prabhupada didn't notice him. He was chanting the whole while. But when Upendra came in and saw a bit of blood on Prabhupada's head, he exclaimed, Prabhupada, what? He put his hand to his head. Oh, you've cut me, he said to Prabhupada. But that was all he said. Upendra later told Krishnadas that he had committed a great offense. That evening, Krishnadas went to Prabhupada and mentioned the cut. There is no difficulty, Prabhupada said. You are just a little young yet. You don't have a steady hand. There is a saying in India that a mother teaches her daughter-in-law by teaching her daughter. In other words, the mother will most readily give corrective instructions to her own daughter, but the instruction will apply equally to the less accessible daughter-in-law. Similarly, Prabhupada gave many instructions, not only during class lectures, but in daily dealings with his servants, such as Upendra. Any exchanges with the Acharya are themselves teachings, both by precept and example, and the whole world can benefit from them, from hearing them. Okay, so this is very interesting. Sometimes devotees have a tendency to say, well, Prabhupada's letters are specific to a particular individual, and therefore some principle of time and circumstances must be applied. But here it's quite clear, and Satsuru Maharaj is extrapolating, and we can see how Prabhupada is commenting to the devotees that this is not just something to be casually overheard and then forgotten, but that these instructions are meant for all disciples, not just the ones that were there at the moment. With Upendra, Prabhupada's instructions were often in response to Upendra's mistakes. Upendra followed Prabhupada everywhere. One day they were walking downstairs on the way to the temple, and Upendra, walking behind, called out to Prabhupada to get his attention. Prabhupada turned around on the stairs, raised his cane, and said, I told you never to call from behind. On the way back from the temple, Upendra was supposed to carry Prabhupada's Śrimad Bhāgavatam, eyeglasses, and cart house. One evening, Upendra got sidetracked talking with a guest, and when he returned to the house, Prabhu was waiting for him. Govinda Dasi warned Upendra that Prabhu was angry at having to walk back to the house alone. Uttering apologies, Upendra entered his room. Prabhu said, "Whenever you are to do something, do it nicely. Do not be irresponsible." One day Upendra was looking for Prabhu within the apartment, and he went to into Govinda Dasi's room to ask her where Prabhu was. As Upendra left Govinda Dasi's room, he met Prabhu coming down the hall. Later Prabhu called him and told him, "You are a brahmachari. You should not be in the same room alone with Govinda Dasi or any girl. Do not do like that in the future." When Govinda Dasi had to go to the doctor, Upendra, although having no experience, whimsically volunteered to take dictation for Prabhu as Prabhu answered his letters. Prabhu began to dictate quickly, and Upendra immediately ran into trouble trying to write down his words. At the end of the letter, Prabhu asked him to reread it, but Upendra couldn't read his own handwriting because it had been scribbled with such speed. Prabhu looked at him incredulously, saying, "Why do you do things like that? You cannot read your own handwriting?" Upendra attempted to read but could not, and Prabhu had to fill in the whole letter again, while Upendra wrote in the words that he had missed or could not read. One of Upendra's regular duties was to crush up rock sugar candy, which Prabhu took in water as medicine. One evening while Prabhu watched him, Upendra put the crushed sugar candy in the water and mixed it by pouring the water from one glass to another. Somehow a glass slipped from his hand, and in trying to catch it, he splashed it all over his head, face, and the front of his body. Prabhu looked at him and simply said, "Go wash." "No, Upendra protested. "Let me finish making your medicine for you." And as he continued his work, the sugar water thickened, leaving his hands, face, and arms sticky as the sugar hardened and crystallized. Prabhu had said nothing, but watched and accepted the service of his foolish but sincere disciple. Perhaps certain activities cannot be called instructions. They are simply Leela. Now Upendra has a chance to speak. At the Willow Tree apartment, Prabhu would sometimes go out on the back porch. It was very small and wasn't meant for walking, just for going down the back stairs 2 levels. But the people in the apartment below us had a little Pekingese dog that would bark at anyone who would come out above. The dog would run up the stairs to the next platform below and yap away with a shrill bark. Prabhu would go out and stand on the little porch, inciting the dog's barking, and then ignore the dog. Then all of a sudden he would turn to the dog, raise his hand, and make a scary face. The Pekingese would become very frightened and would whimper and run down the stairs, while Prabhu would laugh. He did this a number of times, like a young boy. So Prabhu had a sense of humor. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We'll start the next chapter next time, which is opening a temple in Los Angeles. It's got no charge. And we'll try it. You want to just do a sound check? See if it's coming through. I try it one more time because they'll do it. If it doesn't come through, we'll have to plug it into the battery and hang it over here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Śrimad Bhāgavatam, 3rd Canto, 31st chapter, text 14. Chapter titled, The Movements of the Living Entities. A little difficult to follow along since we don't have it up on the screen. You can just try. Excuse me. Yak panchabhuta rachite rahitak sharire. Yak panchabhuta rachite rahitak sharire. Jano yatendriya gunata chiratmakoham. Yatendriya gunata chiratmakoham. Tena bhikunta mahimanam risham tamenam. Vande parang prakriti purushayo pumangsum. Let's, Hadai, you chant first. Yak panchabhuta rachite rahitak sharire. Chano yatendriya gunata chidatmakoham. Tena vikunta mahimana misham tamenam. Bande parang prakriti purushayo pumangsam. I think Vasili's next. Yak panchabhuta rachite rahitak sharire. Chano yatendriya gunata chidatmakoham. Tena bhikunta mahimanam rishim tananam. Vande parang prakriti purushayo pumangsam. Yak panchabhuta Vande parang prakriti purushayo pumangsam. Is the sound working, Matanga?
Yes.
Good. Ananda, you have a... I just borrow Hadai's for Ananda. Yak panchabhuta rachite rahitak sharire. Chano yatendriya gunata chidatmakoham. Tena bhikunta mahimanam rishim tanenam. Vande param prakriti purushayo pumangsam. Ladies. Yak panchabhuta rachite rahitak sharire. Chano yatendriya gunata chidatmakoham. Tena vikunta mahimanam rishim tanenam. Vande param prakriti purushayo pumangsam. Ya who panchabhuta, 5 gross elements. Rachite, made of. Rahita, separated. Sharire, in the material body. Shana, covered. Ayata, unfitly. Indriya, senses. Guna, qualities. Artha, objects of senses. Chit, ego. Atmaka, consisting of. Aham, I. Tena, by a material body. Avikunta Mahimanam, whose glories are unobscured. Risham, all knowing. Tam, that. Enam, unto him. Bande, I offer obeisances. Param, transcendental. Prakriti, to material nature. Purushayo, to the living entities. Pumangsam, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body, which is made of 5 elements, and therefore my qualities and senses are being misused, although I am essentially spiritual. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to material nature and the living entities, because He is devoid of such a material body, and because He is always glorious in His spiritual qualities, I offer my obeisances unto Him. Please repeat. I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body.
I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body,
which is made of 5 elements. And therefore my qualities and senses are being misused. Although I am essentially spiritual. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to material nature and the living entities. Because He is devoid of such a material body. And because He is always glorious in His spiritual qualities. I offer my obeisances unto Him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The difference between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that the living entity is prone to be subjected to material nature, whereas the Supreme Godhead is always transcendental to material nature as well as to the living entities. When the living entity is put into material nature, then his senses and qualities are polluted or designated. There is no possibility for the Supreme Lord to become embodied by material qualities or material senses, for He is above the influence of material nature and cannot possibly be put in the darkness of ignorance like the living entities. Because of His full knowledge, He is never subjected to the influence of material nature. Material nature is always under His control, and it is therefore not possible that material nature can control the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the identity of the living entity is very minute, he is prone to be subjected to material nature. But when he is freed from this material body, which is false, he attains the same spiritual nature as the Supreme Lord. At that time, there is no qualitative difference between him and the Supreme Lord. But because he is not so quantitatively powerful as to never be put under the influence of material nature, he is quantitatively different from the Lord. The entire process of devotional service is to purify oneself of this contamination of material nature and put oneself on the spiritual platform, where he is qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Vedas it is said that the living entity is always free. Asango yam purusha. The living entity is liberated. His material contamination is temporary, and his actual position is that he is liberated. This liberation is achieved by Krishna consciousness, which begins from the point of surrender. Therefore it is said here, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Person. Om Jnana Timandasya Garanjana Shlakaya Chakshuramritamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lankayate Garam Yakripatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dhinataranam. So the movements of the living entities doesn't indicate the living entities going here and there as if moving about in the city, going from one place to another. But these movements are his beginning from his point of conditioning. And it's described that he's always liberated. So how does he come about to become fully entangled in this disaster that we know is the material world? So we understand that there's ahankara vimudhatma, that due to false ego, one wants to lord it over something. But in his liberated condition, he cannot lord it over anything. This qualitative independence that derives from his constitutional nature has to be controlled in the service of the Lord. But in the absence of that service, we see that there's what we call fall down. He becomes subject to the modes of material nature. So this is not his natural state. But unfortunately, this once covered, just like we had the pastime of Upenja being covered in sugar candy. So initially, the sugar candy, when it's liquid, it doesn't appear to be much of a concern. But as it dries, it becomes hardened and sticky. So this is similar. The living entity has a desire to do something, but this desire manifests in a manner that results in a sticky situation. He ends up having to deal with the six senses, including the mind. So this is the situation that expands, just like spirit expands on contact with matter. So living entities' activities expand on contact with the interaction between the material senses and these material nature, which is not ours to control, but as I said, due to this minute position of independence, we try, and as a result, we become completely entangled, sticky from one situation to another, unable to free ourselves with our own efforts, and therefore we become in a helpless condition going down through these various species of life. This is the essential situation that the living entity, how it's being described. So these are the movements of the living entities. Otherwise, their living entity is, what is the question of movement, so to speak? He is in the spiritual world where everything is eternal, the time itself is noticeable by its absence. And in that sense, movements here, everything is regulated by time. You go from one place to another, you look on the map, you set the map to go this one someplace, and what does it say? It says 5.8 miles, 40 minutes. So this is our situation here, that you can't do anything without this influence of time. And this influence of time is simply, although it looks like just what do you want to say? An innocent figure, that 40 minutes is gone from your life forever. So just to go 5.8 miles, you have to lose 40 minutes of your life. What is the expense? What is that? Now 40 minutes, of course, for a devotee, if it's being spent in the service of the spiritual master, there's no loss. But for the ordinary living entity, that is a complete waste of his entire existence in a gradual, minute form. He doesn't see it like that, but yes. It's as if I came to you and I took a portion of your existence and says, I'm going to take the tip of your finger. Let me just remove that. You're not going to miss it. You'll go on functioning as normal. But then you come and say, take another one. Maharaj Sibi, what is that? he gave a portion of his flesh to save a pigeon, like this, and it was just a test to determine whether or not he was in a fit position to actually be a king, or to have the reputation that he had acquired, that he was so generous that he would even give his own flesh. But ultimately, to take it a little bit by little bit, if I take it, then eventually you have nothing left. So I can start with what is that saying? Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. So this is the situation. So little bit by little bit, time is robbing you of everything. You cannot get it back. If it's not used in the service of Krishna, then everything else is null and void. It's all being used in Maya. If you think I'm just going to go hide out someplace on the one corner of the roof, temple commander won't find me. But that time that's spent like that means that it can never be recovered. How do you recover? So it's marked as a loss. There's keeping a, who's there? There's a personality called Chitragupta. Anybody ever hear of Chitragupta? Of course, Adai has. It's part of his culture. Chitragupta is the secretary to the Lord of Death. So he has a big book. And in that book, the movements of the living entities are recorded in minute detail. So whatever you have done in this life is noted down. And not every single second, but everything that bears, has weight against your judgment, whether you're going to heaven, because everybody goes to the court of Yamaraj. Unless you're a special soul and the Vishnu Dutas come for you, everybody's taken out by the Yamadutas. And at that point, it's determined whether or not they're going to spend X amount of time in heaven and X amount of time in hell. It's not that, everybody goes and enjoys it eternally like some people have this accepted devotee. So Chitragupta, when you go to this court, he knows everything about you. So he knows when you went up on the roof hiding from the temple commander, that you're supposed to be doing devotional service. You're a surrendered disciple. You're just like Upendra, the Krishnadas questioning Srila Prabhupada, it's unnecessarily. In this way he wasn't understanding Prabhupada's position. And this is, of course, many devotees in the early days, they misunderstood Srila Prabhupada's position. That he was doing something and he wasn't doing it properly, therefore he had to be corrected. Okay? But in and of itself, this is an offensive mentality. There's no loss or diminution to carry out the instruction of the spiritual master. Whatever is there will be successful based on not my relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but Srila Prabhupada's. Everything that he did was 100% successful from that perspective. And many devotees became in trouble because they started to question Srila Prabhupada's position. And for what purpose? Just to satisfy some false ego, or to whatever, justify their own inability to surrender, because that's where this faith comes in. Faith only brings us to that point where we have the opportunity to direct our intelligence, direct our minute spiritual intelligence to surrender to the higher instruction of the spiritual master and Krishna, so that they will accept us and guide us. And we see that when there's difficulty, what is that difficulty? Like that, what is Shruti Kirti's book? What is the difficulty? The difficulty is that we don't surrender. And that's a constant endeavor. It doesn't just start or stop, at the point of initiation or when we first came in contact with Srila Prabhupada. You have to continuously refine whatever it is required to surrender. Sometimes, one day it may take more than the previous day. It's not always the same. It's not that I've surrendered once. This surrendering process is continuous. And if it's not done with the correct consciousness, then it doesn't achieve the desired result, which is to become in a position to receive Krishna's mercy. That we read that in the previous verse. Repentant. That one who is eligible, he's categorized as being someone who is repentant. He understands that I'm in this material world due to my past sinful activities. It's not that I just took birth here because, I was some happy-go-lucky, misunderstood jiva hanging out in the Brahmajyoti, and I just, there's somebody at the door, by the way. I don't know if somebody's answering it. So so we have to see ourselves from that perspective, that this constant endeavoring, to those who constantly endeavor and worship me with love, I give the intelligence by which they come to me, by which they understand me. So it doesn't start. You can't get complacent. You can't think, okay, I'm here. I'm in the temple. No, it doesn't. The temple is the spiritual field of surrender. You have the greater facility here. In the material world, you have the jiva, the kshetra and the kshetragya, the knower and the knower, the field of knowledge. And in the temple, you have a whole different set where you have an opportunity. You're no longer bound by the limitations of material knowledge, which you can only progress. You see people, they get their PhDs, their double PhDs, their triple PhDs, because they want to expand their knowledge, but they don't understand how to do it. So they just keep thinking, let me just get these certificates, which seem to connote a particular level of achievement, but it's nothing. It's actually just the living entity's frustration and not being able to achieve that which is ultimately satisfying. Because real knowledge, once achieved, gives one this sense of satisfaction that can never be taken away. It can never be removed, just like someone can say, if you're a professor, after getting all this, making this whole endeavor, doing all this work, at some point someone could say, okay, you're fired. So what was it all for? And when they fire you, maybe they send out a bulletin that says this person is unqualified to teach in any position, in any institution, anywhere in the country. So then what? All that time wasted. But here, nehabhikramanasosti, there's no loss or diminution. And not that we're looking to make mistakes in order to learn from them. It's easy. There are so many. That's what the Śrimad Bhāgavatam is giving us, the opportunity to see every possible scenario that has ever occurred in anyone attempting to achieve perfection. All the lessons are here. You don't have to go out and make your own mistakes. Reinvent the wheel. Reinvent the torture wheel. What for what? But stubbornness is also part of the living entities, because due to ignorance, what is the definition of insanity? And expecting a different result. So this is, the whole material world is filled with people who are doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And it's punascharvata charvananam. It's the what do they call, the mudha? The ass in India. He has the most exemplified existence. Everybody uses him to either, the Dobis, Prabhupada would use him to show that how foolish he is to be packed up with so much laundry just to get a few blades of grass which are free for taking on the side of the road, but yet he thinks, I have to carry this weight in order to do that. So that's his qualification for being a foolish entity. And the other foolishness is that when he goes to get sex pleasure from the female ass, whatever they call the donkey, mule, He gets repeatedly kicked in the face. Repeatedly kicked in the face. And if you haven't seen it, it's difficult to understand how the modes can cover a living entity to such an extent. But yet the humans are doing the same thing. They go through the same ritual to try to enjoy that pleasure. Repeatedly being kicked in the face, but in different ways. Being kicked in the face by getting a house, being kicked in the face by getting a car, being kicked in the face. There's, all these things are just being kicked in the face just for that simple pleasure to enjoy sex life. So we have to look at, the living entity's pitiful condition and have compassion on them. First, have compassion on ourselves and try to eliminate these triggers that are constantly being pulled. It's like you pull the trigger on a gun. Many people will tell you, I remember from an early age, my father, who was, was a very nice guy, very experienced, and he said, why he said this, even when before I could, old enough to handle a firearm, he says, never pull your weapon unless you're going to use it. It's a very smart thing to say because, the tendency is once it's out, it's very difficult to de-escalate the situation. Law enforcement, and he did this during the war, so he knew. He says, never pull it out unless you're going to use it. So I remember that simple saying my entire career. This is not something that you do lightly, so it's it has, how do you call it? Irreversible results. Can't take it back. Just like suicide. You shoot yourself in the head, it's once and done. You don't get a do-over. It's there, it's finished. So these things are there. People, you see foolish people, and like again, we should learn from others' mistakes. There's one, what do they call them? Reels? It's on the internet of some guy playing with a gun and shooting himself in the head, accidentally or on purpose, nobody can say. But it looked to be accidental and foolish on top of it. You don't play with a loaded weapon. That was the other lesson. Treat every weapon as loaded. You can think it's unloaded, but it could be a fatal mistake. So it's the same thing with the material energy. Material energy is always waiting for you to make that mistake. To think that you're somehow immune, that you've already done it and it won't happen again. No, this doesn't. You never play with fire. Material energy, what's the analogy that we learned from early days as a brahmachari? Butter and fire. So you don't play with fire. All right, this is what Prabhu was telling Krishnadas. He says, why are you going into Govindadas's room? You're a brahmachari. Okay. So a very simple thing. And in those days, maybe it wasn't so obvious because of our conditioning that was something that should not be done. And Prabhupada was giving everyone the benefit of this instruction, even to someone who maybe wasn't going to take it seriously. But yet he did it. He took the time. He said, no, don't do that. And so many things are there instructively, directly and indirectly. We're reading the Bhāgavatam, what are the instructions that we're taking from these various purports? Obviously, from one perspective, this is very densely philosophical and requires to be unpacked, bit by bit. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta could speak on one verse for months at a time. Months at a time. And we're just kind of going over them one a day like this, without really trying to dissect the situation. And I'm not particularly qualified to dissect it to that minute degree. But what we should take away is that we are here. What does it say specifically? I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body, which is made of 5 elements. So what does that mean? How am I separated? The Lord is in my heart. Some separated because this is a dense covering. This material body is sometimes compared to a cage. But at the same time, also it's covered, what do they use? The material, the modes of material nature. Sometimes Prabhupada would describe it as being covered by the modes, meant like you take a colored glass and you put it over a flame. Now, flame has its brightness, it has its own unique attributes. If I take a blue glass and put it over that flame, it shows through blue, or a red glass or a yellow glass. So this is the modes of nature covering the living entities, pure intelligence. And so in this way, we see that where these 5 elements have completely covered me, and it's not possible independently to simply take away that glass. And that's why we say in the morning, Samsara Dhavanali Loka, that the spiritual master, he basically, through his efforts, and the different analogies are there, whether it's by rain or this, he's simply breaking that glass and releasing, from the modes of material nature, if you want, through knowledge. Tadara justamo bhavo kamalo bhadayasche cheta ete anavidam ditvam satvam prasidate. That this, just by constant association with transcendental sound vibration, all of these impediments, all these barriers, all these coverings are being slowly removed. And as we, directly or indirectly understand this advancement, we have an obligation to act on it. And that was what Prabhupada was saying with regards to that scenario in Mayapur with the dirty bathroom, which we've mentioned many times. And that if one sees a situation that it reflects the mode of ignorance, he has to correct it. That's his opportunity, just like this is a temple. You go into some place and it's dirty, what does it say? That a Brahmin leaves a place cleaner than when he found it. So if you walk into a bathroom and it's dirty, technically you have an obligation to do something to correct that situation. Not to think, oh no, I got to run out on Sankirtan. You can also correct it by telling the right person who's in charge of it. But that means you have to find that person. And even then it may not be corrected. So sometimes if it's that simple to correct, just do it. So I think somebody patented that saying, right? Just do it. So we have to be careful when we say these things, Might go out on the internet and get scrubbed. But the act of doing something like that it's not patented. Because we understand that that what it really means to engage in activities that produce a transcendental result. They say these things and it doesn't mean anything. First, what does it mean? Just do what? They leave it ambiguous for a reason, because they know that some people with a perverted mind will take it in that perverted way. So we have to see things through the eyes of the scripture. So this Shastra Chakshus is very important, and that comes from us exposing ourselves, Shrinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. Hearing with purified heart through the activities that the spiritual master engages us in. And that's the only way to get from this point of material contamination to the point of liberation. And that's what we're hearing about. So here it just like it says, I offer my obeisance unto him. So we see that in the Bhagavad Gita, Namashantastamam Bhaktya Nitya Yukta Upasate. Always offering obeisances, always offering devotion, always offering worship. Such great souls endeavoring with great determination. So this is not a difficult process. It's a simple process. And it begins with just offering obeisances. Just like the devotee Prabhupada was pleased when Krishnadas was going to work and he would see that Krishnadas was offering obeisances. He was offering obeisances in the hallway, offering obeisances on the street. And Prabhupada was acknowledging it. So every time you're offering obeisances, the spiritual master is acknowledging it, whether you can understand it or not, because of that connection there's that story, a little bit off the beaten path, but there's all types of mystic powers that living entities have. So in the Mahabharata, there's one story about the Bhaka and the Brahmin. You know that one, Hadai? The Bhaka and the Brahmin? A Bhaka is a crane. You know, in India, if you go to Vrindavan, you see these big cranes. They're more like herons, but they're huge. They're like 5, 6 feet tall. They're not like some small bird you see. And you know, they can be mistaken from a distance to be a human. They're so big. Anyway, so the one time this Brahmin, he had this friend, this crane, and he went and he complained to him. They said, you know, the crane said, well, what's wrong, Brahmin? He said, oh, I'm so poor. I'm so distressed. Everything is just like falling apart. My whole life is just a shambles. And the Bhaka said, why? Why are you so worried? He said, there are some Rakshasas over here. You just go there and you tell them that you're my friend. And they will finish your problems. So the Brahmin, having faith in his friend, the Bhaka, he went to the Rakshasas. And the Rakshasas were thinking, oh, look, a meal has come to us without any endeavor. Because Rakshasas are flesh eaters. He said this Brahmin walks into the midst of these Rakshasas, they're going to immediately, you know, take him and dismember him and eat all the good parts first, and then, you know. So but then he announced that, well, my friend the Bhaka sent me, and they said, oh. I said, oh, okay. And the Brahmin wanted to speak. He said, no, don't worry. Everything's taken care of. You go back to your place. The Brahmin was surprised. So he went back to his place, and just like that story with Sudama Brahmin and Prabhu in Krishna Lila, he went and there was, all of a sudden his house was transformed into, you know, this opulent palace, you know, something that seemed to have descended from the heavenly planets. Everything, he was completely, there was no limit to his opulence and wealth. He was just, so this was how, you know, coming from the Rakshasas, they had such power. Anyway, then at one point, the crane, the Bhaka, came to see him, and the Brahmin just ignored him, didn't give any acknowledgement, actually got into an argument with the crane and killed him. And as soon as he killed the crane, the Rakshasas, knowing they have this mystic power, understood the situation. They immediately came to that place, you know, confronted him and said, your friend who gave you, you know, who is our friend, who we awarded you this opulence only based on your friendship with him, you have killed him? So they immediately killed him. And these are Rakshasas, they're man-eaters, they're flesh-eaters. But they wouldn't eat his flesh. They dragged him into the jungle to give his body to some cannibals. And as soon as they gave it to the cannibals said, why do you bring him here? You're flesh eaters, why don't you eat him? And the Rakshasa says, we don't eat ingrates. And the cannibal said, well, we don't eat ingrates either. So they had to drag his body off and just leave it for some other living entities. So being an ingrate, according to the Mahabharata, is the most grievous offense that one can commit. So we have a very heavy obligation to the spiritual master, not to be ingrate, not to be ungrateful. You know, what the spiritual master has given to us is priceless. This is the debt that cannot be repaid. We say this, sometimes we say it lightly, or take it lightly. They don't take it seriously. Initiation is not just some cultural tradition that one takes in order to become part of some group or some cult. You know? Initiation is a transcendental agreement, it's a contract. I surrender to you from this point forward. Right? That's in the Ramayana. It says, from this day forward, I am yours. And Lord Chaitanya repeated that to Sanatana Goswami. That this was his simple prayer. From this day forward, I am yours. So that dedication, that level of commitment is something that has to be internalized. It's not a take it. If you take it lightly, then you get some light return, right? You get bhakti light. It's like when you put your money in a bank, you're looking for the highest return on your investment. You don't want 0.05% interest. You want 0.55 interest. Right? But some people are foolish and they put their money in an account that bears no interest. I saw, nowadays you see it's 0.01% interest. What is that? It's like negative interest almost. And then they charge you $14 a month to have the account. So you get nothing. You owe them money.
It's 5.2 something.
There's a smart man. His money is working for him. So, but we have to have the same level of intelligence and apply it to our spiritual life. Don't do something which is going to give you a 0.1% return. Do something which is going to give you a 100% return. Nothing can beat that investment, right? People who bought gold or bought Bitcoin, 5 years ago, they'll say, oh, they have 10,000% returns. And so we have this same opportunity. At the time of death, that person's Bitcoin is valueless. It's worthless. You get no benefit from it. It hasn't saved you from death. It hasn't saved you from your sinful reactions. You still go to hell. Doesn't matter how much money you had. And even if you go to heaven, the heavenly planet, so of course you had some good karma, you still have to take birth again. Because there's no such thing as good karma. All karma is bad. Pious activities or pious means you have to take birth in order to enjoy the result of those pious activities. What's the point? You take birth again and again and again and again. Eventually, in one of those births, you're going to make a mistake and end up becoming an animal. So there's no benefit. So-called pious activities, are for those who are in the karmakanda stage of conception. But for those who are following the path of bhakti, they understand that this life, we should understand that this is our opportunity to exit the samsara, this cycle of transmigration, which is unbroken until you come in contact with the bona fide spiritual master. And so everyone here has achieved that. They've all come in contact with the Bhaktivedanta purports, which are their law books for 10,000 years. 10,000 years. So such a benediction. And it was a very small window of time that Prabhupada appeared and disappeared. And so we're trying to extend that by maintaining what he gave us so that others can benefit. Otherwise, we see now there are less than 5,000 disciples initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And of those, it's hard to say how many are left. Difficult to put a figure, but not many. Just that's the point, not many. So it has nothing to do with those who came first or those who came second or those who came last. The point is that the information that Prabhupada presented will always be here for those who desire to be guided to the extent, and all they have to do is surrender. The difficulty is that what do you surrender to? You can't just say, let me surrender to this book. Let me surrender to this picture. So therefore, evam parampara praptim, it seems somewhat formal. But yet Krishna has put this in the Bhagavad Gita, not for just so that he could see the word, Krishna, what does he have? Why does he have to even say these things? He backs it up by saying, Imam Vivasvate Yoga, I gave this instruction also to the sun god. So who knows the sun god? So there are so many opportunities to surrender. Sometimes you get it from one channel, or sometimes you get it from another channel. But the point is, you must come to the point of surrender. And however you do it, intelligently, using the system that's been preserved, doesn't require to become some fanatical savant, acolyte. You have to just use your intelligence. You're getting an opportunity. Try to appreciate what it means. Ultimately, we're surrendering to the knowledge that Prabhupada has given to all of us, even to those who are acting now in the capacity to continue the momentum that Prabhupada started by acting on his behalf. This is not a small service, to take the karma of so many individuals, and to be very careful in doing so, because it can be very disastrous. So it's the position of a spiritual preceptor is when you initiate someone, you take all their karma. It's very heavy. People take it lightly, they don't understand. But we've seen how it has affected those who have taken that service. So don't take it lightly. One time when Prabhupada was asked, why does the spiritual master get sick? He said, because my second initiated disciples are not chanting their Gayatri mantra. So one has to be very careful. He's accepted this mantra, Yasastri Sandhyam, Yasya Prasadat Bhagavat Prasad, Yasya Prasadan Nagati Kutobi, Dhyayam Stubham Tashaya Sastri Sandhyam, Vande Guru Sri Charanarvindam. So don't be neglectful. Don't think that, no, it's just a ritualistic tradition. No. This reciprocation is mutual. The spiritual master is benedicting us, and in turn I have the obligation to serve him and protect him. You read about the story about when Prabhupada was coming down, Harisari was relating that when he didn't know at first, because it's nothing that we advertise, but Prabhupada in New York, the devotees were very serious about protecting Prabhupada. This was during the height of the deprogramming situation with the individuals who were kidnapping devotees and basically torturing them. And so, Prabhupada was a target at that time. So Harisari said, I didn't realize at the time that all the devotees who were surrounding Prabhupada were armed. We were all armed. Because this was our obligation, to protect the spiritual master. But, we don't advertise these things. So, but the protection that's afforded in that time and circumstance is nothing compared to what we have, our obligation with regards to chanting our Gayatri mantras, following the 4 regulative principles, and chanting our rounds. It's all the same. Prabhupada used the second initiated disciples as an example, because all of these instructions are on the same platform, whether it's the Gayatri mantra, whether it's the 4 regular principles, whether it's the 16 rounds. It's all the same. One is not. So they'll all result in spiritual masters being, how can you say, put into a an uncomfortable situation. Just for trying to save you. So don't be ungrateful like the Brahmin whose flesh was not fit to be eaten even by the cannibals. So that's the lesson we learned. Don't be ungrateful. Any questions or comments or Ananda, anything? No? So yeah, we have so many instructions to take with the Prabhupada gave out when he said, just act in such a way that Krishna will see you. It's a simple one. Because what it does is it gives you a guiding point. Like they used to have when you were a kid, let your conscience be your guide. Let your conscience be your guide. So this is our conscience. He said, just try to act in such a way that Krishna will see you. So this way, you're protected by that. You're not going to do something which will reflect poorly on the spiritual master, create difficulties in your relationship, do something which is going, or damage or destroy your spiritual life, commit offenses to the spiritual master or to devotees. Those things can immediately have a disastrous effect. All right? That's where they coined that term, instant karma. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, some people say that Prabhupada said different things about different social phenomena, and we don't accept those things as absolute. We accept his spiritual teachings and not necessarily whatever he said about social etc. So, can we say that this is also kind of ungrateful?
Well, it's certainly, you're second guessing the spiritual master. You can label that any way you want, but certainly it's not the position of a disciple. So many, Kali Yuga is very effective. Just like when the change of seasons takes place, and when winter comes, sometimes it comes a little gradually. It doesn't get cold all at once. It's not that one day it's 85 degrees and the next day it's 25 degrees. No, there's a gradual transition. You have autumn, and then you have winter. So a lot of these situations are taken like that. People don't realize how quickly this transition can catch you by surprise. You think it's okay, you go out one day and it was nice in the afternoon, and all of a sudden at night it's freezing. So this is the slippery slope of these ignoring the instructions of the spiritual master in favor of something that seems to be favorable, according to time and circumstances, for preaching or for social convention or that. These things are temporary. These things are temporary. They're already, if you read any scripture, if you look at any historical situation, why did great civilizations fall? Why did Rome fall? Why did Greece fall? Why did any of these civilizations fall? It was because of moral degradation. And so the same thing will repeat, because this is no different than the Greek or the Roman civilization or any other civilization. It's not that because it's here in the West that it's different. No. As soon as because Kali Yuga has its effect. So winter is upon us, whether we like it or not. And these the effects of Kali Yuga are everywhere to be seen. And so it will become harder and harder in one sense for devotees to stay strong, which is why Prabhupada established temples. So that you have this association. And you have the deities. These are not just simply some mental conjecture to sort of give us a substitute for what we idealize as the absolute truth. No, this is a genuine transcendental feature of bhakti yoga that can only be understood by those who have clean hearts, clear minds. Yes, otherwise it's idol worship. Just plain and simple. And even for those who are not pure in heart, that's what they'll see. That's what they'll do. They'll minimize it. Say, this is not the real thing. The real thing is, let me go and try to chant the holy name in a solitary place. There's not. This is very, very difficult. There are those who can do it. There are a few. Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya, he could do it. But what did Prabhupada say about Haridas Thakur in Mayapur when he used him as he was illustrating the point that in the dead of night, this prostitute was sent by the Pandits basically in Puri to try, because Haridas Thakur was born in a Mohammedan family, but he became a Vaishnava. And he was a perfect example of someone who had achieved the highest level of perfection in that state. He was not just someone who, because this is what we see here, the externals, the material body, one's birth, one's heritage. This is all superficial. So here's Haridas Thakur, who was given the name Namacharya by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was chanting in his bhajan kutir, which is a little ways away from the Jagannath Mandir. And the Pandits were envious of his advancement in spiritual life, that so many people would come and take their blessings from him, and from their perspective, external, oh, this is just a Muslim, he's just a Mohammedan. They don't see that this is a person who is transformed, just like you can transform base metal into gold if you know the alchemy. Mercury, tin, like this. And so they sent this prostitute, most beautiful prostitute in the kingdom at the time, to try to entice him in the dead of night, because they knew that Haridas Thakur was chanting 3 lakh names of Krishna. 22 hours a day chanting. 22 hours. And so they knew he's up chanting his rounds. And so when she came, he said to her, no, that's okay. I'm chanting now. You can sit down and wait, and when I'm done chanting, we can, engage in something according to your desire. So when Prabhupada related it like that, the devotees who were in the audience, they laughed. And Prabhupada said, no, don't laugh. It's not funny. He said, you cannot do this. He said, I cannot do this. So we don't try to imitate, we try to follow. So this is a lesson that yes, if you want to do like that, you can certainly try, but the chances of success compared to the chances of success remaining in the association of devotees is much less. So someone who's intelligent, why would you accept something that has a 10% chance as opposed to something that has a 90% success rate? But it's all, Prabhupada said in that purport in the 10th chapter, it says, intelligence means to analyze things in a proper perspective. So you have to have that perspective, and you don't develop it incidentally. It comes about through engaging in service to the spiritual master. And then you'll have that perspective to see everything, the intelligence to see everything in its proper perspective. So anyway, so we're going over too much time. We have so many things to do on a Sunday. Sunday feast, all the guests are coming. The temple has to be spotlessly clean. Hadai will engage everyone accordingly. He'll use his X-ray vision, which is one of the powers which he has achieved, in chanting from an early age, to see all the neglected spots that aren't usually seen. All right. Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Sri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai. That's it. The movements of the living entities ki jai. And this should be kept for the evening's speaker.
These things all charged.
Yes, charge these things. I don't know what's going on.